The Conjureverse is back with The Nun 2, which I didn't even know was coming out until like a month ago. I'm not gonna lie, I love the Conjuring franchise, which is weird because even I feel like there's more bad entries than good ones. It's a horror cinematic universe. There's enough good ones for me to be invested, and did I say a horror cinematic universe? Inject that into my fucking veins. But yes, the unfortunate fact is a lot of these movies do disappoint. The Nun 1 was maybe the biggest case of that. After The Conjuring 2 set Valak up as this, to then have a spin-off that was very much marketed as the darkest chapter in the Conjuring universe, and to then barely be able to see anything in the movie, yeah, it just wasn't good. So for this one, I wasn't expecting much, especially like I say, since I didn't know they were doing a sequel to The Nun, because the first one was shit. But actually, and I'm glad to say, I quite enjoyed this one. Now, maybe it is because my expectations were so low, and it does suffer from the same problems as most of these movies do. Like, in between the more horrific stuff, it doesn't really know how to spend all of its time. It does often feel like it's meandering and just waiting for itself to do something. But how this movie-going experience went for me, like, I was just waiting for it to turn into that typical horror schlock. But it didn't. I mean, there's a decent bit of that in there, but like overall, as a package, by the time the credits rolled, I was like, I'd had a good time. And I was relatively hooked in as well. I will say, I've only seen the first movie once, and I did feel that kind of affect my viewing, because it does follow on quite a bit from that first one, and it fills in the gaps enough if like you don't remember it or you haven't seen it. It's not like utterly integral, but there were a few times where I was like, I don't remember who this is or where we left them. But I did quite like how they linked the two films. It was nice to have a sequel that does genuinely follow on, and even if that plot in the first film, I actually couldn't tell you the plot of that film. I actually don't know what the plot of The Nun 1 is, but this plot is much more interesting, even if it is still relatively kind of bare bones. The main problem I think here, as often, is the script. I thought the performances were actually really good, particularly Taissa Farmiga. I don't know how to say your name, I apologise. But yeah, she's great, which should be no one's surprise because your sister is Vera Farmiga. But everyone was great in the movie. Even the child actors were really good. And I actually found myself attached to Maurice. Like I say, I remembered him from the first one. I couldn't tell you anything about him, but they actually make him someone you can kind of care about in this movie. He builds a connection with one of the teachers and her daughter, and I've forgotten both of their names, but it's particularly the bond between Maurice and Sophie, is the daughter's name, that was actually quite special. I was actually invested in that, and they did a really good job with it, I thought. It also has a really good sense of dread, which was something I felt was missing big time from the first one. James Wan set the Nun up as this all-powerful demon, and so you're in a little bit of a corner when making a film with it as the main antagonist, and we're seeing lots of it because it's going to lose a bit of that, I think. The first one made the Nun less scary, but this one brings it back for me. I think they actually utilised the Nun really well, and you very much feel that it is like a massive evil force that can pull these strings, and does. So Sister Irene is asked to investigate this string of deaths that have been happening, and she really doesn't want to, because she doesn't want to go through the first movie again. No one does. The scene where she is asked to look at these, and like they're kind of telling her like, yeah, this demon is back, it felt a bit like in The Rise of Skywalker, where it was just, somehow Palpatine returned. Somehow the Nun returned. But anyway, that made her character much more interesting. Like, she does not want to be in this situation at all, but she's kind of been forced into it, and this situation that challenges her faith. And I think this film also confirms that there is a connection between Sister Irene and Lorraine Warren, which makes sense because they're sisters in real life, and there's a very small snippet where you see Lorraine's eyes when Sister Irene is like having a kind of vision thing, which I liked because you don't need to like address it majorly, but it's a bit weird to not mention it at all. Throughout the film, there's also some genuinely scary scenes. There's an all-timer for the Conjuring franchise in this film, which is plastered all over the trailers, which I wish wasn't, because I would have loved to kind of feel that for the first time. But I also understand that you gotta market it, and that scene has been a big part of the successful marketing, because it does have a very iconic feel to it. But it's a great scene, and one of my favourites from the franchise. They utilise the nun kind of in the background, in the shadows, and you do feel like if you look hard enough in the corner, you might see her creeping around or something. I keep saying her, it's a fucking demon, but it kept the stakes high, and as well as some character deaths that actually catch you off guard. Another thing that these films seem to struggle with doing is keeping the stakes high and making the characters feel actually in danger. But this film does kill some characters off, and some characters that you don't expect, as well as at times you don't expect. The final act in this film is fucking insane. Definitely a massive upside though, because it just goes very high energy, a little bit kind of out of nowhere, but we have a demonic goat running around. Like, give me more of that. That was so fun. It decides to just kind of go all out, and I really liked it. I liked how they used the character's faith at the end, as it was spoken about early on, how one of the characters, Deborah, who is played by Storm Reed, she's kind of doubting her faith, but at the end they're in a desperate situation where they need to rely on their faith in this wine cellar, and as all the wine kind of pours out, like, their faith turns into blood, and as the cellar is flooded by all the wine, their faith allows them to believe that it represents the blood of Christ, which in turn stops Valak, as we know from the first film that is what stopped her then as well, but she was able to survive through Frenchie. And yeah, that's kind of goofy, but the execution is done really well in my opinion. Everything just kind of clicks in that final act. It's far from perfect though, and there are some serious moments of just horror movie logic. There's also like a MacGuffin in the movie that I'm kind of mixed on, because the way they find it is really stupid to me. Like, it's through shining a light in a specific way through this stained glass window, and it creates like a red dot that you can see where they buried this MacGuffin, these magical eyes, and it's like, that just feels really stupid. Also, after Sister Irene seemingly stops Maurice, who is possessed by the nun, she leans over him like out of grief that he's just died, but then obviously the nun grabs the eyes off her, because of course he's not dead. But Irene should know that it's not going to be that easy to defeat this thing, you know? There are also some scenes where it is just too dark and I can't see anything, but the film overall has a really nice, creepy atmosphere. It's very possible that my expectations were just very low, and so that I would have enjoyed this no matter what, but what can I say? I think if you're a horror fan, you'll find some fun in this for sure. Also, with The Conjuring 4 being seemingly hinted at in the credits, I can't lie, if this franchise is going to have the nun as it's like Thanos,
it would be great to eventually bring it back full circle, bring the nun story and tie it back into The Conjuring.
I'm all up for it.